Today we're going to talk about how to prove you deserve a second chance. Of course, I'm going to put air quotes around prove because if you do what I suggest correctly, you won't have to prove anything. You'll just be. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyways, I thought probably the best way to approach this was to divide this up into making it essentially a 5-step method to getting a second chance with your ex. So those 5 steps are going to be identifying your attachment style versus your ex's attachment style. Step 2 would be beginning to build secure habits during a no contact rule. Step 3 is getting to a place emotionally where you're okay not wanting your ex back. Step 4 is start asking why instead of what, especially during the value ladder. And then finally, step 5, acknowledge that it's going to take some time. Let's dive in and discuss. So step 1 is all about identifying your attachment style versus your ex's attachment style. And my first thought when I decided to write an article about this and record a video about this actually revolved around attachment styles. I suppose it's the phrasing of the keyword. I'm not really a big fan of proving you deserve a second chance with an ex. The reason I think why it bugs me is it's like insinuating that you did something wrong when the reality is that it takes two to tango in relationships. It also strikes me as a common thought that many of our anxiously attached clients would have. So oftentimes we'll find that people who work with us tend to be anxious by nature, and they often think that they're at fault for all of the issues in the relationship. And they really fail to see the big picture is that, sometimes your ex is just as at fault. Even if you think you're the one or you're the reason the relationship is the demise, I can still find something that your ex did wrong to make you act the way you potentially acted to cause the demise of the relationship. So I think really before you do any proving to an ex that you deserve a second chance, we really need to discuss attachment styles and how they work. Specifically, what yours is versus what your ex's is. So the Attachment Project, they have this really, really great quiz that you can take to kind of help you figure out where you fall on the attachment spectrum. If you're secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful, where kind of you are in that. And I took the liberty of filling out the quiz because I was really wanted to show you what my scores looked like. And I ended up coming out, to my shock, a dismissive avoidant. So basically, according to my scores, it showed that I'm a dismissive avoidant, which often means that I'm very independent and self-sufficient. I've learned to rely on myself and not on others. And this doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want to have relationships. It's just that the dismissive characteristics can often get in the way of fully reaching my potential. My wife obviously might argue with the assessment above, and I think there are some flaws with the assessment, but it can give you kind of a starting point with regards to where you stand and where your ex stands. We often find that most of the people who are working with us are in relationships with avoidant exes. In fact, a recent poll in our private Facebook support group in June of 2021 showed that close to 80% of participants believed that their exes had avoidant or fearful attachment styles. And the reason I'm bringing this up is weirdly because of the phrasing of this video. Usually thinking you need to prove you deserve a second chance is a very anxious thought. It's like almost as if you're insinuating that you're completely at fault for the breakup. Even if you were technically a big reason for the breakup, it's never that black and white in the relationships. So from an attachment style perspective, what you should always be doing in order to quote unquote get a second chance with an ex is working towards evolving or maintaining a secure attachment. And I think that's the first step towards getting that second chance. I've talked in the past about this concept of attachment gravity and how those with secure attachments almost have this gravity to them. They can pull others towards them with insecure attachments and actually alter those insecure attachments beyond recognition so slowly but surely that they're no longer insecure. So in my opinion, your first step at getting a second chance with an ex doesn't really start with saying the right thing, but rather it's about living the right way so that you become that secure attachment that they will be drawn towards. So again, more of a mentality thing. Let's move on to step 2.
Real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video.
Step 2 is all about beginning to build those secure habits during the no contact rule. Now, one of the things that you're going to hear a lot about if you are going through a breakup is the no contact rule. And really, one of the things that I think is separating us from a lot of potentially our competitors is the way that we view the no contact rule. So in our view, the no contact rule is essentially this period of time where you're purposefully cutting off conceivable communication with an ex after a breakup, but the intent in which you do this is actually more important than you would realize. So you shouldn't be doing this to make an ex miss you. So cutting off all communication with them shouldn't be done just to make an ex think like, oh, I want them back, like manipulating them into wanting you back. Instead, what you should really be using your time for during this is to rebuild your own life so that you can actually outgrow your ex. Now, by doing this, the no contact rule can have that added benefit of actually making an ex miss you. So kind of by doing the opposite of what you think, you can kind of get the benefit of what you want. Now, generally, this period of time where you're ignoring your ex is going to last anywhere between 21 and 45 days. Though I think what really sets our version of no contact apart is that we try to encourage our clients to use all of their time to focus on themselves. And this is the part of those healthy, secure habits that I really keep talking about. So earlier I mentioned that most of our clients tend to be anxious, and one of the trademarks of an anxious individual in a relationship is how they're spending their time. I've found that most of the time they literally spend 90% of their time focused on their ex, and that can come in many different forms. Sometimes they'll think about them. Sometimes they'll stalk them on Facebook, stalk them on Instagram. Sometimes they'll try to win them back in very direct ways. Sometimes when they're trying to win them back, they'll try to convince them that it was a mistake to leave by making them jealous in very obvious ways. And really, one of the major benefits of our version of no contact is that it allows us to reorient our clients so that they actually have better time management skills and discipline when it comes to focusing on themselves. This is part of those secure habits that we're talking about. What would a secure person do? Well, they wouldn't be doing some of these things. Sure, they would think about their ex. Sure, they may want their ex back, but they're allowing themselves time to heal and they're focusing on things that they can really control, which is a very stoic mindset. So let's move on to step 3. Step 3 is all about getting to a place emotionally where you are okay not wanting your ex back. Now, perhaps the greatest irony of the work I do in helping people through breakups is that no matter their end goal, the path almost always is the same. So in 2020, I actually did 20 hours of interviews with success stories, and that was not on purpose, believe it or not. That's just how the math worked out. Now, my goal with these interviews was pretty simple. You can actually find them on our YouTube channel if you look around. All I wanted to do was find out exactly what worked in recovery from breakups. Now, most of our clients view a recovery based on their ability to win an ex back. So those are the individuals that I ended up interviewing. But what's interesting is the one big takeaway was actually really simple. In fact, it was so simple, I was a little disappointed. It's kind of like going on some massive voyage, expecting to find this new continent, only to have gone around in a complete circle and winding up where you started. All right, so are you ready for this big takeaway that we learned from interviewing over 20 hours of clients? The big thing I learned is that if you can get to a place emotionally where you outgrow your ex, you can dramatically improve your odds of getting them back. And in hindsight, it actually makes a lot of sense. After all, what would a secure person do after a breakup? Well, number one, they would allow themselves time to grieve the loss of the breakup. And number two is they would pick themselves up on and carry on with their lives. And since most of our clients, exes, ended up having avoidant attachment styles like me, apparently, what becomes fascinating is their grieving process. So I did a video a couple of months ago called How to Make an Avoidant Ex Miss You. And I make a really interesting connection in this video between avoidance and when they begin to miss their exes, as opposed to when anxious people begin to miss their exes. So the big thing there is we found that avoidance typically don't miss you until they feel safe missing you. And that doesn't typically happen until there's no chance of ever reconnecting. Only then will they begin to have nostalgia and think about the good times. So essentially what happens is that by getting to this place emotionally where you're kind of blasé about getting back together, you touch that secure mentality and quicken the process of having that avoidant ex think you're over them, and in turn can speed up their own nostalgia process. And usually when they get to that nostalgia process and you connect with them again, they're a lot more open to rekindling things and hearing what you have to say. And that kind of leads us to step number 4. And step number 4 is start asking why instead of what. So thus far, we've really only talked about macro type strategies like time management, getting into the right secure habits, being disciplined during no contact, and really the mentality of kind of shifting your behaviors towards a more secure, healthy behaviors. But if you want to reconnect with your ex, macro strategies can only get you so far. Eventually, you have to be willing to master micro strategies as well. And one of those strategies that revolves around how to create desire within a conversation is going to happen during the talking and kind of getting to know each other, reacquainting yourself phase. The real problem that we have is a lot of times people don't really know how to build desire within these areas of conversing with an ex after a no contact rule. And I'll tell them that what they need to do is have more meaningful conversations, but meaning is really hard to quantify. And it really wasn't until I stumbled across this YouTube video called The Epic Method that an idea triggered for me. So there's this guy, I think his YouTube channel is called Vinny Theory, and he talks about this known method called the Ford method, which is all about how you can like have more meaningful conversations. But he basically argued that this is a failing method because it asks what questions instead of why questions. And I thought this was like the most brilliant thing and most applicable thing to many of our clients. So the problem with most conversations that we have when we're conversing with someone is we're asking what instead of why. And I've gone on and on throughout the history of my website on why it's important to ask your ex open-ended questions, because those are more likely to create a dialogue, and that's part of the problem with asking what instead of why. For example, what is your favorite food? Well, me, it's chicken fried steak. The conversation is over. That's it. Then you ask another question and another question. But there's more to mine there. Compare that to why is it your favorite food, not what. So you ask, what is your favorite food? I say chicken fried steak. And then you follow up by saying, well, why is it your favorite food? To which I would respond, well, it kind of reminds me of home and some of the memories I had of my father taking me out to eat before he'd take us to a baseball game with the Astros. I grew up in Houston. So which answer do you think garners a better connection with an ex? I think the answer is kind of obvious, the why question. So it's really important that you start asking your ex why so they can actually talk about the thing that they really want to talk about the most, and that's themselves. And that leads us to our 5th and final step of getting to a place where you can prove to your ex you deserve a second chance. And that is acknowledging that it's going to take some time. So I started ex-boyfriend recovery in 2012. So it's been about 10 years now. And when I started ex-boyfriend recovery, had some very, very ridiculous notions on how long it would take to quote unquote win an ex back. So ridiculous, in fact, that I was literally under the assumption that it could be done in 30 days. In fact, still to this day, there are people out there that will argue that it's possible to get an ex back that quickly. And technically it could be, but experience and research has basically taught us something different. So when we looked at our average success story happens an average of 5.5 months to 6 months after our clients began working with us. Again, that's an average and may not reflect reality. Someone could have been treading water for months after a breakup before they come into our orbit, and we can give them the tools they need to succeed and the encouragement they need to succeed. They could be floundering for months before the clock starts with us. So reality, that 5.2 month figure or the 5.5 to 6 month figure I just quoted is actually probably longer in reality. So here's my point. Realistically, if you want to go the route of getting a second chance with an ex, it's going to take some time. Preparing you for that ahead of time is going to do wonders for managing your expectations so that you can focus on the things that really matter, namely yourself.